Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar that's going to be fast-paced and very practical. My name is Jean Herb. I co-direct the New Jersey Climate Change Resource Center along with my colleague Marjorie Kaplan. The Climate Change Resource Center was established by a law adopted here in New Jersey about 3 years ago that establishes the Resource Center, or the CCRC, housed at Rutgers University, with the intent of the Resource Center being a service center to provide expert support and service to all sorts of planners and decision makers at the state and local level, in the public sector, in the private sector, in communities, with regard to addressing climate challenges here in New Jersey. We're really thrilled to have this opportunity to be able to walk you through some of our enhanced data products and visualization tools. There's a number of folks who are currently on camera who are part of the Rutgers team. Dr. James Shope, Lisa Aramuller, Lucas Marxen will be presenting today, Pritpal Bamra, I mentioned Dr. Marjorie Kaplan, and Michelle Stewart, and then the fabulous Matt Drews, who is our webmaster today, who likes to be mysterious and stay off camera. What we're going to do today is I'm going to turn it over to Lucas Marxen, who's going to present this series of enhancements to existing tools and the introduction of some new tools. We're going to walk through each tool. We have built in sufficient time. After each tool, we'll pause. Lucas will pause. We'll take any questions. I'll tell you how to do that in a minute. And sometimes we'll be able to answer your questions when you put them in the chat. Other times, Lucas or another member of the team will come off mute and answer your question. If there are questions that we can't answer or that are so specific to your needs, we promise we'll probably chat back to you and ask you for your email address, and we'll follow up with you to be able to follow up with everyone and make sure that your questions get answered. One question we know we will have today is, what is the Rutgers team doing in terms of providing more in-depth training and technical assistance for use of the tools? We are currently adopting our work plan for how to become more available to yourselves and others to be able to provide technical assistance and training and use of the tools. We are going to take the liberty of taking everybody who's participating and registered for today's webinar and to add you to our constant contact, our email list, as well as our LinkedIn page, because that way we'll be able to notify you when there's opportunities for one-on-one technical assistance, or also for training opportunities. So that'll be the best way for us to keep you informed. The work that we're going to present today builds on a long period, 15 years or more of work on behalf of different partners here at Rutgers, and in some cases with partners in state agencies like the Department of Environmental Protection and the Office of Emergency Management and the Department of Community Affairs, to be able to build these kinds of authoritative tools that can assist all sorts of end users in planning for climate change impacts, right? So this is not just necessarily tools for local hazard planners or local community planners or for mayors. These are tools that we've really designed to be able to assist lots of end users. The last thing I'll say is that I know it can sometimes feel like these tools are just this big giant data portal, but what we want to emphasize to you is that what we've done here in terms of these enhancements to the tool is that we've created dedicated apps that take all of the data that Rutgers houses and builds them into applications that can be used for particular end users. For example, for local hazard planners, NJADAPT, for local people who are concerned, such as public health officers, with the connections between climate and health, New Jersey Public Health Adapt, right? So there's these applications. Additionally, what we also do is we we know that it's too much to expect all of you with your busy schedules and your very full plates to do tons and tons of data analysis. So we take the opportunity to do some analysis of data to create data can be helpful to you in terms of your own kind of work related to climate resilience and adaptation. So we'll be showing those today as well. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Lucas Marxen, who leads our work developing the NJADAPT data tools and who is from the Office of Research Analytics, which is housed in the New Jersey Agricultural Experiment Station here within Rutgers University, and he's a member of our Rutgers Climate Change Resource Center team. So Lucas, I'm going to turn over to you.
Thanks, Jean. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. You see that okay, Jean?
Yep, you're good.
Great. All right, let's hide this up here. All right, so all the tools I'm going to be presenting today and all the modifications and additions to existing tools can all be accessed through the Climate Change Resource Center's website. We can have someone add in the chat, but it's njclimateresourcecenter.rutgers.edu. And on the right here, you'll see we have our NJADAPT page. And from here, you can access all of the tools that we currently have available, including the new ones I'll be presenting today. We provide small descriptions and then links to all those tools. So to begin with, I'm going to start with some of the new tools that we will be releasing today. They'll be publicly accessible. The first is what we're calling our local planning navigator. It's basically a climate-related hazard planning navigator for municipalities and counties in New Jersey. And it was designed to help municipalities that are basically trying to be in compliance with the new climate change related hazard vulnerability assessment that's required through the municipal land use law in New Jersey, to be able to more easily access the data we have available through the NJADAPT program to meet those needs. So on the page here, we have menus up top here where you can go to our home and the overview. We'll also have a section I'll show you on hazard evaluation and on impacts. And you can, on the top here, select the specific locality that you're interested in getting data for. So you can either select the county as a whole, or you can select a specific municipality within the county. They're all easy to use drop-down menus. And then as you go through the home page here, you'll see we have a recommended citation for the data. We have a section here on where to send emails if you have any questions or you want to provide feedback on the tool. And then we also have a list of resources related to the CC RHVA requirement of the MLUL. So considering like the Resilient NJ Toolkit, NJADAPT Strategic Climate Action Plan, and things of that nature. So getting started, we first bring you to getting started with hazard evaluation. So as part of the RHVA, we basically provide data sets on some of the different climate hazards that can be components of that part of the MLUL plan. So they're broken out into coastal flooding, inland flooding, extreme precipitation, and extreme heat. As you can click into any one of these. So looking at coastal flooding, for instance, we provide a brief introduction about some of the issues around coastal flooding, looking at things such as tidal flooding and sea level rise and flooding events that can occur on top of sea level rise. We also have a little call out box here that provides some information on NJADAPT guidance on planning for sea level rise to provide some background information and relevance to the analysis you may be doing. And then we have our getting started section where we show you how you can basically access the NJADAPT tools to get data on coastal flooding hazards. And so we have it broken out into maps, reports, and statistical data. And in the map section, you can see here, we have it broken out to some different types of flooding. We have a map of current high tide flooding, which shows 2 feet of coastal flooding, of sea level rise by the year 2100, and high tide flooding on top of sea level rise by 2100. As you can click on any of these links, it'll open up a new tab, providing you some information about the sea level rise you've chosen, and providing an interactive map that shows the location you've selected. And you can pull up a little legend here to see the information that's on the map here. But so this, we're looking at Camden with 5 feet of sea level rise. You can see how it's going to impact some of the waterways around the city and the areas that would be inundated due to that flooding. Going back to the tool, we can, like I said, go into some of these other ones. You can see 7 feet as well. It brings up the same type of interface and loads the same map. And you can see the change that occurs, and you can zoom in to see specific areas. And we also have links here to take you to our NJ Flood Mapper application. So if you want to do more than just kind of see that basic visualization of the data, this will take you directly to NJ Flood Mapper with that data set loaded, so you can actually do further analysis by adding additional resources or assets or facilities and things like that to your area to kind of look at what may be impacted by that flood level. Under the reports, we provide a link out to our climate snapshots tool. We specifically have a link for the flood impacts report, and which show you, again, you can select the location you're interested in. So we can look at Camden again. And we can see specific flood impact reports looking at built infrastructure, critical assets, or natural and working lands. So if we look at our critical assets report, again, it provides you a nice report format that can be downloaded as a PDF, or you can download the data behind it. And we provide tables showing the different types of critical assets within your locality, the total number of assets, and those that are exposed at 2 feet, 5 feet, and 7 feet of total flood inundation. And provide that graphically as well. And the graphics can all be exported as images, so you can pull a table to be used in, say, a PowerPoint presentation or a report. We also show the data based on the FEMA flood zone, so showing the number of assets within, say, a 100-year floodplain and a 500-year floodplain. And maps are included as well. So you can access those as well from the local planning navigator. We also have ones that will take you to look at flood impacts specifically on populations, so public health, vulnerable populations. We also have some data on disability populations within those areas. The statistical data takes you out to our NJADAPT website, which is basically designed to help planners with doing hazard mitigation planning, and so provides more detailed data that might be required as part of those plans. And so we have links here to take you out to that, where you can access our Mod 4 property tax parcel data. So this is actually data for the entire state of New Jersey that basically has all 3 million tax parcels in the state that have been analyzed against different types of flood levels. So you can see how much of each of the parcels are impacted by, say, the FEMA flood zones, as well as anywhere from 0 to 20 feet of coastal flood inundation. And we also provide a link to the GIS data set for the parcel composite of New Jersey that can easily be linked to that data set so that you can do GIS mapping of that data. And just to show you here, so you can see, I'll take you to NJADAPT. And again, you can select your locality to get location-specific data that you're interested in. And all the way down here at the bottom is that Mod 4 parcel flood analysis data set I was telling you about. We also provide a link out to some GIS story maps that we created to help guide you through some of that process. So this is actually a story map that provides a walkthrough on the GIS assessment steps for doing that parcel level flood analysis. Provides some examples of walking through that, where, as you can see, add the tax parcels on, and look at some of the different flood levels.
Hey, Lucas, and
Yep.
just so you know, people are loving this so much, they're asking if you could slow down a little.
Sorry, I know I tend to have my
I know.
singer voice
It's
going
all
on
good.
these. I apologize. I will slow down. So that covers kind of the coastal flooding. Like I said, you can see you can access maps, reports, and statistical data looking at coastal flooding. If we go to inland flooding, we have basically the same types of information. We provide an introduction to the inland flooding issue, any kind of links to DEP guidance around inland flooding. So in this case, we link out to their new inland flood protection rule that went into effect last year. And then again, we have a section which tells you how to get started using our NJADAPT tools. We provide a map. In this case, it provides a map of the FEMA flood zones for your location. And so you give that a second to load. And so you can see here, the blue areas are the 100-year flood zone, and the orange areas are the 500-year flood zone. So you can see how those would impact your locality. And again, we have a link that will take you out to NJ Flood Mapper if you want to do a more thorough analysis of your area and look at other data sets as well. Similarly to the coastal flooding, we have links out to our climate snapshots, like I showed you, which will also include the impacts of the 100-year and 500-year flood zone for those different types of reportings that we have. So it's looking at, say, facilities or critical infrastructure. And then again, we have the links out for statistical data to the NJADAPT application, where you can access that Mod 4 tax parcel data and see which parcels are inside or outside the flood zones and by how much. The next hazard that we have in our local planning guide is extreme precipitation. And so again, we have an introduction here talking about extreme precipitation, and we link out to our State of the Climate report, which provides some more in-depth information about changes in precipitation that New Jersey can expect to face in the future due to climate change. And then we bring you into with the tools that we have here. One of the things we point to is under our statistical data, we have our climate impact reports, which include tables showing current and projected rainfall amounts locally. And so when you click on that, you can see here, for this is so specifically for Camden and Camden County. We provide the different types of precipitation storm events, so the percent chance of each of those events occurring, whereas a 1% chance would be equivalent to a 100-year storm event. We provide the baseline in terms of the number of inches of rainfall that historically occur due to those types of rainfall events in New Jersey and for that location. And then we provide the projected numbers for both a moderate emission scenario and a high emission scenario. For those who may not be familiar with these, the moderate emission scenario corresponds to basically carbon emissions tracking with current global regulations and in place, whereas a high emission scenario is basically a increase in the amount of global carbon emissions worldwide. And we provide data for both the mid-century and late century, so looking at roughly 2050 and 2100 time periods to show how precipitation will change due to those different scenarios for those different storm events. And so as you can see here from the majority of these, due to climate change, we expect the rainfall amounts to actually increase in terms of the number of inches of rainfall for each of those storm events. For the next hazard evaluation we have is extreme heat. And so again, we have an introduction here, which provides links out to our State of the Climate report and other information regarding the increasing temperatures and extreme heat that are expected to impact the U.S. and New Jersey specifically in the future due to rising climate change issues. Under our data, we broke it out into maps, reports, and statistical data for extreme heat. So some of our maps that we have, the first one is a data on land surface temperature. So this is data from the DEP that actually is using data from 2022 during the summertime and shows basically land surface temperatures across the state. And so it'll zoom in on your specific locality that you selected and show basically the land surface temperature that was recorded for those areas. This can be important to help understand areas that could be experiencing heat island effects and extreme heat that could affect public health. Similar to that, we also have a map that provides information on the concentration of impervious surfaces versus tree canopy. This is again to try and look at the potential impacts of the heat island effect that can occur. And so in this case, Camden City is very urbanized, but if we look at the legend here, the areas that are darker brown have a much higher ratio of impervious cover to canopy cover. And as we move upwards, the darker green have much higher percentages of canopy cover versus impervious cover. So the areas of dark brown areas where we expect that you can have a higher risk of heat island effect due to that increased ratio of impervious cover. And then the crosshatched areas that you'll see over these areas are areas that have been identified by the DEP under their environmental justice law as overburdened communities. So you can both see the areas that are both at risk of potential heat island effects as well as those that may have populations that would be particularly vulnerable to those effects. And again, we have links to go out to interactive versions of these maps so you can explore the data further and get more information about the specific locations that you might be interested in. You can actually click on the map as well. It is interactive, so you can get some of that data as well from there. One of the things that we recently released in the past year is a heat vulnerability index analysis for the state of New Jersey. And so we have a link out to that as well. This is an index that takes into account multiple factors, looking at things such as exposure, sensitivity, and things of that nature to understand what areas may be particularly at risk to heat issues in the future due to climate change. And so it's a 5-point index where 5 would be the highest risk and 1 being the lowest. This is basically the simple map to kind of show you those areas, but again, you can go to a link out to an interactive map where you can see the within each of the census tracts that are mapped here, you can see the individual factors to go into the heat vulnerability index and why it scored the way it did. You can explore those further. Moving on to the report section, again, we have our climate snapshots where we have some data on the local climate. So we can look at both public health exposure, where we have some information here on the general climate data. So looking at things such as days above 95 degrees Fahrenheit, cooling degree days, which is a measure of the amount of energy, electricity needed to basically cool a facility or building to 65 degrees Fahrenheit, given the outside temperature, and then the maximum temperature in July. Again, looking at a historical baseline, and then the changes expected under a moderate and high emission scenario for 3 different time periods. And so there are other data sets there, and you can look at also health-related sites and exposed areas related to heat. And for statistical data, we have a link out again to our NJADAPT platform, where you can actually get more detailed data than we provided in some of the maps there. You can access down here under heat hazard analysis. You can access data specifically at a county level on heat waves. This provides information on the historical amount of heat waves in terms of the amount that occur and their average duration, and then provides projected data for different climate scenarios in terms of the increase in the number of heat waves that are expected in your county and the change in the duration that could potentially occur. We also have links to that heat island and overburden community analysis, where you can access the maps from here with the data set directly, the heat vulnerability index data as a table or as a shapefile, so you can map it yourself in GIS if you're interested in. And then we have links out to the maps for those as well from here. So that covers all the hazard evaluation components. If we go back, the next section that we have is to look at the assessment of impacts. So we have for impacts, we have
Hey, Lucas, can I add something?
Sure.
So just so folks are clear, that when Lucas talks about the hazard assessment section, that follows the requirements that were in the amendment to the municipal land use law that requires the hazard assessment. And then the next section that Lucas is going to talk about in terms of impacts is also a requirement. So really what this tool does is it specifically follows the requirements of that amendment to the MLUL to really make this something that's easy for all of you to use in terms of trying to comply with those MLUL amendments. Sorry, Lucas.
Thanks, Jean. So as you said, so moving on into the assessment of the impacts under that requirement, we have broken out into demographics, critical facilities and infrastructure, and community assets. Under demographics, we talk about the impacts to people and particularly of populations of concern. And then we have some links to some of the specific data sets that look at this information. So when we look talking about populations that may be more vulnerable than others, we have data about local socio-demographic factors at greater risk of negative health outcomes from climate change. This actually links out to our new public health adapt tool, which I'll be talking about next. But we provide data on general proportional demographics, so looking at within your specific location. So in this case, we're looking at Camden City. The amount of people and the percentage of the population that are at specific categories that may be at risk. So people under the age of 5, people age 65 and older, people 65 and older living alone, people with disabilities, things of that nature. We also provide breakouts on the race demographics within your area, so you can understand if there are specific racial groups or ethnicities that may be at risk that you may need to plan for, as well as different household proportional demographics that could be of use. So understanding old housing, so housing built before, say, 1960, which may not have adequate air conditioning resources to handle things such as heat. Measures such as overcrowding, which is a measure of census that uses that looks at households that have more people than rooms within them. Things such as renter-occupied units, which may be specifically at risk, or people with no vehicles, which may be at risk for in terms of things of evacuation during coastal hazard events. We also have some information on learning how these populations are affected by inland and coastal flooding. This takes you out to our climate snapshot that specifically looks at socially vulnerable populations. So this is an analysis that looks at the urban area within each of the municipalities or the counties within the state and looks at how much of those urban areas are impacted by different flood events and uses that data to try and estimate the population that would be exposed under each of those. And this is actually using data that's from the CDC Social Vulnerability Index. You can see it's broken out by those categories, by some of the individual variables.
And Lucas, I'm assuming you appreciate taking a breath if someone else chimes in here every now and then. So I just wanted to point out that the nature of the data that Lucas is showing comes from the reason it's incorporated here is for a couple different purposes. One is we work a lot with end users, and we hear from all of you that you wanted access to these types of data. But also as part of our sort of the research that supports the development of these tools and the enhancement of these tools, we spend a lot of time looking at the requirements for things like the climate change related hazard vulnerability assessment in the municipal land use law. We look at the requirements for county and local hazard mitigation planning. We talk to public health officers about their need for access to data. And so then what we do is we do our own research to identify the data that can address those kinds of needs and requirements. Yep. Thanks, Lucas.
Thanks. And so the final one we have here is local data about the presence of people with disabilities that may be specifically at risk to some of the issues regarding climate change and their impacts. So this provides a profile snapshot for your locality, again, providing information about just the general demographics, but then giving a breakout in terms of the disability demographics within your municipality. So you can see both the total number, total population that have reported to have a disability, breakouts by age and sex. And then we even go down into some more detail looking at specifically populations that are below the poverty level with disabilities, or that might be unemployed with disabilities, different racial groups with disabilities, and then also broken out by disability type. So if there are specific groups that may be more at risk of ambulatory difficulty or cognitive difficulties, things of that nature. So that covers the demographic section. Moving on to facilities and infrastructure. So this specifically is looking at the types of assets that may be in your municipality or county that may be specifically at risk due to climate change. These are often called sometimes lifeline sectors. So these can be everything from schools to hospitals to police stations, fire departments, things of that nature. And so we provide some links out to the different data sets we have available throughout the NJADAPT suite of tools to help you kind of address that need. So the first one here is data about potential flooding impacts on those lifeline sectors. So under NJADAPT, the first section we have here is a flood hazard analysis. And so this actually takes data from all the different lifeline sectors as indicated from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. You can download these data sets for your specific location as CSV files, which will provide individual records for each location. And then included in there, they've all been pre-analyzed against the different types of flood scenarios that we've been discussing. So looking at 2, 3, 5, and 7 feet of coastal flooding, as well as the 100-year and 500-year FEMA flood zones, which cover both inland and coastal areas within the state. So for every single one of the facilities within each of these categories, you can see which of those facilities are at risk of those different types of flood impacts. In addition to the downloadable data, we also have links out to maps, which will take you to NJ Flood Mapper. So you can easily go to, say, health, and it'll open up NJ Flood Mapper, for the state or for your specific region. If you select a region ahead of time, I didn't do that here. But it'll basically preload all the individual data sets for that lifeline sector, as well as the different flood data sets that you can easily turn on and start looking at potential impacts for your area. The next section, the next data element in this section is looking at our built infrastructure report. This again takes you out to our climate snapshots and specifically the built infrastructure report for your town, which looks at facilities such as wastewater treatment facilities, energy generation facilities, power plants, bridges and gas stations, and again provides information about their exposure at different levels of coastal flooding, as well as the inland FEMA flood zones as well. And so you can see which ones of those are impacted. And then we also provide maps showing those embedded here as well, again, with links to go back out to NJ Flood Mapper for the more interactive view if you would like. And finally, the last one we have is our critical assets report, which same as the built infrastructure report, except this one focuses on critical assets such as schools, fire stations, hospitals, law enforcement facilities, nursing homes, and assisted care facilities, childcare facilities, and evacuation shelters. But it has the same format in terms of showing the exposure to the different types of flood events, as well as the maps. The final section is our community assets. And so for community assets, we have a more little detailed section here to kind of explain, what makes a community asset, an asset for my community, and talks about how these can be very different depending on your locality, and why it's important to consider these as part of your hazard planning. So in some of these cases, like whether certain locations, such as like a local YMCA, may be very important in terms of your community being able to handle different types of climate change impacts or flooding events or things that may occur. And basically, how do you consider them critical as well? And so for this one, we basically provide a kind of an example of how this can be used, because this can be very location specific. But we have, for instance, an interactive map that shows historical sites and districts sensitive to inland flooding and future coastal flooding. This will take you out to NJ Flood Mapper, and it basically preloads a historic preservation data set as well as flooding data set. And so these are interactive. You can actually click on the individual locations and find out what they are. So for instance, the one is Fort Monmouth Hospital. And again, you can switch between, you can add the different types of flood events on here to see which ones might be impacted within your area. In NJ Flood Mapper, we have added the ability to bring in your own external data. So if you have, as a community, if you develop a GIS data set that has locations that are important to your community, there's ways for you to basically bring it into Flood Mapper, and you can then do your flood analysis as well there. And then we provide a little call-out window with potential information, sources of information for community assets. So, that covers the local planning guide. This is really meant to be kind of a new direction we're going in with a lot of our tools, whereas a lot of our previous tools were specifically, like Gene said, focusing on providing curated data around specific end users or stakeholders. We are moving more towards creating more tools that provide more guidance that will provide you like how to access data across those different platforms to meet specific needs that you may have in either your professional job or within your community. I'll take a pause there.
Okay, so that is one of several tools that we're presenting to you today. What I see is there's a tremendous amount of activity in the chat, which is great because I see everybody in the Rutgers family is answering lots of questions. And I also see that Lisa has started a Google Doc of questions that are not answered. So let me just say this and then see if people in the Rutgers family want to scream at me. I think if we don't get to your question today, we will post Q&As on the Climate Change Resource Center website, in the days to come. This recording will also be posted. But I see that there's tons and tons of questions. Thank you.
There's just one
get to them.
There's just one question that really hasn't been answered. We could ask Lucas.
Okay, go ahead.
I think Lisa, right? It's just it's from Matt Mampara. Hi, Matt. And so Matt is asking if the impacted asset counts reflect the high field, the Homeland Infrastructure Foundation level data, or a higher resolution state generated data set. And that's the real question. And we may need to get back to you. I'm not sure.
Sure, no. So actually all the data for the lifeline sectors in NJADAPT is all the HIFLD data. We've pulled that in for analysis. It has to get updated every so often. Like I think we have right now on an annual updated basis. But we pull the data from there. We do have to do some cleanup because if you've worked with the HIFLD data, you'll know that it's quite dirty and has a lot of errors in it that need to be addressed. We find a lot of issues with locations that are labeled as being in New Jersey, but being shown in completely other areas of the country, and vice versa. Some places that are located in, say, Michigan, but are labeled, are in New Jersey, but are labeled as being in, say, Michigan. So we do some QA/QC on that data set to try and eliminate some of those errors. And then we perform the flooding analysis against those data sets. So those, if you go to NJADAPT, these are the HIFLD sections, and within each of those, we have it broken out into each of the subcategories that they provide for those.
Thanks, Lucas. And Lucas, just go back to where you were before, because I want to point out I just want to point out, go down, that one of the other things that we've done here, because I'm seeing this in the activity in the chat, is that we've added in, well, some people have asked us for to be able to give you a citation that you can use if you're using these tools and these data to, for example, apply for funding or, something like that. But also as we added in this section where you can send us a question or give us feedback. So I'm seeing in the chat some folks saying, did you ever think about adding, whatever, redlining data or something like that? So again, we welcome all that kind of feedback. Rutgers team, is there anything else that we need to answer in the chat, or should we let Lucas move on?
I see one that I'll just address quickly from Mariam Shams. Yes, we do, within the individual tools, we typically provide links out to methodologies for any data sets that we've developed internally in-house here at Rutgers. For other data sets that are external, we provide links out to those data sources so you can find the information about how they were generated themselves. In all cases, we typically try to use the authoritative data directly from the sources. So as they get updated, they automatically get updated within our tools. But like I said, for those that we've developed in-house, yes, you'll see that most of them will have links out to the methodologies as well.
Thanks, Lucas.
Yep.
Okay, Lucas, your break's over.
Sure. I'll also answer a few quick questions that showed up. One other about natural land assets. Yes, in our climate snapshots tool, we have a specific report looking at natural assets. It looks at impacts of flooding and things of that nature on different types of land uses, such as wetlands and agricultural lands. So you can explore those as well. All right, I'm going to move on. Everyone else can jump in and answer questions for me.
Thank you.
All right, the next new tool that I'm going to cover, and I'm going to try and talk slower here, so I appreciate your patience with me. A lot of coffee this morning. So this is our NJ Public Health Adapt tool. This was
Hey, and Lucas, I need to give a shout out. There's a number of folks on the webinar. I'm not going to name names that were super helpful in terms of giving us feedback on development of this tool, including local public health officers that are associated with NJACHO, American Public Health Association, NJ the State Department of Health. So thank you, everybody, for all your help in building this tool. Go ahead. Sorry, Lucas.
No problem. So with this tool, we were really trying to look at what data sets and analyses we had available to try and understand the potential impacts of climate change on public health in the state of New Jersey. And so this tool, if you've used any of our climate snapshot tools in the past, you'll see it's quite familiar in terms of the interface. You can basically select a countywide if you want countywide data, or you can select a specific municipality to get municipality-specific data. And what we've done is try to break out the information we have about the potential impacts of climate change on health into 5 different types of reports. The first one specifically looks at climate conditions that could potentially impact health. The second one looks at existing health conditions that could potentially be exacerbated by climate change. The third is our heat vulnerability index, which I've showed briefly already. The fourth is environmental conditions or exposures associated with negative health outcomes that could potentially be exacerbated by climate change. And the final one is socio-demographic factors that are at greater risk of negative health outcomes from climate change. And so we've already seen some of these, but I'll go through each one briefly just to kind of show you the type of data that we've included. So when looking at climate conditions that impact health, we try to include data across the different types of hazards that can occur due to climate change. And so the first one we have here is something we've already seen in the other tool, our land surface temperature data. We have links to take out to interactive versions of this map, but again, it'll show you for your selected geography. It'll show you the land surface temperature map with the legend to show what the different temperatures that were recorded in those areas in July 2022. We also provide information about that data set, where it comes from and how it's generated. Similarly, we have our heat island map that we had in our local planning guide here, just looking specifically at that ratio of canopy cover to impervious cover for the location you specifically selected. And then we incorporate data on our heat waves. So this is the data set that's available through NJADAPT. We've provided here in a nice tabular format for you for your location. As you can see here, we've included the average number of heat waves that occur annually, the average number of days the heat waves last, and then the maximum number of days those heat waves typically last. And so looking at the baseline, historical baseline based on the modeling, and then the model data that's projected out under the 2 different emission scenarios and that mid and late century time periods. As you can see here for Camden City, the number of heat waves is expected to increase, depending on the scenario by a significant amount, and those durations are expected to go, to very high numbers potentially, with the maximums reaching, anywhere from 16 days to 20 days, or to even higher. We've also included some of the projected climate data that's in our other climate snapshots. So looking at days greater than 95 degrees Fahrenheit, the number and the projected increase, the max temperature in July, and those cooling degree days. And again, we provide information about each of those variables, how to explain what they mean, and how to use them and where they come from. The next climate section we have for our public health is looking at extreme precipitation and how that can potentially impact public health. Again, we provide the data that we saw in the local planning guide, looking at the different types of storm events that can occur and the amount of rainfall that's projected to fall from each of those storm events and how that's projected to increase due to climate change. We then include some of the flooding maps to help visualize areas that would potentially be at risk of different types of flooding. So in this case, this first map is our FEMA flood zone map, showing the 1% annual chance flood hazard, which is the 100-year storm, and the 0.2% annual chance flood hazard, which is our 500-year storm in the orange. And so again, you can see which areas of your municipality are particularly at risk for those types of flooding events. And then we also provide maps on sea level rise, looking at 2 feet of sea level rise, 5 feet of sea level rise, and 7 feet of sea level rise. And so that's our climate. Oops, let me just move this over here. Our climate impacts report. You'll see there's a little drop down on the top right here, so you can easily jump between any of the reports that you want once you've gone in and selected your location. So we'll move on to our existing health conditions report. And so this is data that comes from the CDC's National Environmental Public Health Tracking Network. It's part of their behavioral risk factor surveillance system data. And so this is self-reported data on different types of health impacts and health conditions that are reported at a local level and then are modeled out to the census tract. And so you'll see here we have a map showing the concentrations. You can pull up the little legend here to kind of see the percent prevalences for each of these. So in this case, we're looking at asthma prevalence across census tracts in New Jersey. And on the left here, you can switch between the different types of health conditions. So looking at asthma, COPD, coronary heart disease, heavy drinking, obesity, smoking, diabetes, and high blood pressure. And so as a public health official, this can help you maybe understand specific areas within your locality where there's a higher concentrations of people with specific health conditions that may be particularly at risk, that you may want to have certain types of maybe interventions for in terms of dealing with the impacts of climate change. The next report is our heat vulnerability index. So we kind of talked about this a little already, but this was a methodology that was designed here at Rutgers that takes from heat vulnerability index studies that were done in other states and areas. We have a link out to our full methodology that you can view if you want to see how that was done. And then we also have a link out to our interactive version of the map, which I'll quickly open up just so you can see that. And so on this map, you can actually click on the individual locations. Oops. And you'll get little pop-ups that show basically your overall indicator score and shows the different components that go into that. So looking at exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity for dealing with heat. We provide information about all those. And then you can see under each one, they're categorized and provide the score that was received for each of the individual variables that went into that index. And this can help you to understand specific areas that may be at risk due to high heat going forward in the future. The next section of our public health adapt tool is our environmental conditions and exposures that may be associated with negative health outcomes. So this is pulling different types of data sets regarding environmental conditions, environmental factors. So we have data such as the average annual daily traffic data, which can be a measure that can impact air pollution within a lot of localities. So it looks at the total number of cars, light trucks, and heavy trucks that are the average daily amounts within the municipality, but also provides it at the county level for kind of a comparison so you can understand if your specific locality is higher or lower than the average within your county. We also provide historical data on ozone within your locality, particulate matter, which we expect to, right now the data goes out to 2018. As new data becomes available, I would expect these to go up, especially after the issues we had last summer with the forest fires in Canada impacting the air quality here in New Jersey. So we provide both the days over the 24-hour standard, as well as the annual average mean for PM 2.5. We again include our heat island impact with the overburdened communities for those who are interested in seeing that. And then finally, we include sites that could be potentially in flooded areas that can impact health. So these are specifically looking at sites such as Toxic Catastrophe Prevention Act sites, scrap metal facilities, soil contamination areas, known contaminated sites, solid waste facilities, and restricted wells where flood waters could potentially cause hazardous chemicals to leach into, say, water supplies or local waterways. And so we provide for each of these the number of sites within your locality, and then the number that are potentially impacted by 2 feet, 5 feet, and 7 feet of sea level rise, as well as the 100-year and 500-year chance flood events. And then finally, we have our socio-demographic report, which I showed earlier. Again, we provide the detailed information about the population estimate from the Census American Community Survey, as well as the percentage within the population. Like I said, we look at things such as age, people below the poverty lines, people that speak English less than well, people with less than high school education, people with different types of disabilities, people who work outdoors that may be particularly at risk to high heat issues, people with no health insurance, or people who live in group quarters. Again, the breakout by race and ethnicity, and those household breakouts as well. And so this is kind of like I said, this is one of our new tools. This was really meant to be kind of an initial attempt to look at the impacts of climate change on public health. As Jean said, we really appreciate we've received a lot of input and feedback and help from a lot of the local public health officials and statewide officials across the state. And we'll be continually improving and adding to this over time as more data and information becomes available.
And a little bit of a shout out to our friends in Somerset County who are also working with us to now take some of these data to apply to as kind of a little bit of a proof and concept to apply it to help inform updating the local hazard mitigation plan. So that can be a very interesting demonstration project. So do we see any questions, Marjorie and Rutgers team, Lisa, others that we need to answer that are in the chat?
Yeah, we've been trying to keep up with it, but we
I think there's a
We-
couple.
Okay.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Christina asks if we're engaging directly through formal outreach with municipalities regarding mitigation strategies, especially those that are most vulnerable to certain risks.
I'm not sure I understand the question. So maybe the person that asked that question, if you could put your email in the chat, we'll follow up with you directly, maybe, and make sure we're answering your question fully. Okay, thanks.
And then Pat Noble just asked about combined sewer overflows, Lucas.
That's a good one. Yes, we can, that's something we can look at incorporating in. I don't know if that was something that was originally considered or not. I'd have to go back and look at our, some of the data sets we looked at, but yes, that's a good point. Thank you for bringing that one up.
And we also had a question about, I think just in general, people are looking for citation information. We do have one in the Climate Navigator, but I think we'll have to put one on the homepage for each one of them, and also but I think also, Lucas, in the tables and graphs, they're looking for citations for where the specific data were for the tables and the graphs.
Yes, so I think in some cases we try to include those. If we haven't, we'll go back through and we can add those in quickly. That's an easy thing to do. Thank you.
And thanks, a shout out to Nick Tafaro, who says this is a great, but a lot. So yes, we are aware that we are presenting a lot, but we wanted to have one webinar where we can give you the overview of all the new tools. And yes, we will have ongoing trainings, webinars. You know, if you're someone like Nick and you want us to engage with people in your county and your offices, we're happy to do that. So we're happy to make arrangements to be able to work with various end users to be able to really apply these data.
Yeah.
Yes, the Office of Planning Advocacy is, and I see them actually on this webinar, is very familiar with our tools. Thank you.
Marjorie, Lisa, any other questions?
Lisa, anything
Yeah,
else?
so we have a question about whether or not the Health Adapt, Michael Cobra, hello. He's asking whether the Health Adapt will be linked to the Climate Navigator site. And he said it looks like it isn't right now. So Lucas, maybe you want to talk a little bit about that.
So the local planning navigator links to the public health adapt to pull specific data sets as necessary. The broader climate navigator, which I can talk about at the end of the webinar, is the new the new approach we're taking with a lot of our tools, and the public health adapt will definitely be integrated with that. This was just launched publicly today, so we're still working on integrating into the new framework.
Which is also a great opportunity if you're someone who wants to be a tester with us as we're, you know, laying out new tools and things like that. You know, put it in the chat. I'd like to be a tester when the time comes. So please feel free to do that. We'll know how to follow up with you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Marjorie, Lisa, any other questions?
I think
There's a lot.
Uh,
Still
I think
So-
I think we've answered the ones that are really ones that pertinent to this.
Yay, and I see folks are talking to each other, which is so exciting. Okay,
I mean,
Lucas,
we're not going to get into discussions about opinion.
I see people signing up to be testers. This is exciting. Okay, Lucas.
All right, so the last two things I'll be covering are some updates to some of our existing tools with either new data sets being incorporated. These are relatively short, so we can discuss them quickly, and then we can kind of open it up to kind of more questions in general. So the first is for our NJADAPT platform. We are continually updating the data sets that are incorporated in here. As we go through, we try to incorporate things such as the new Mod 4 data as it becomes available each annually. So we've only just gotten access to the 2023 data, so we'll be incorporating that and into our analysis. But what I wanted to point out is one of the new analyses that was done by one of our colleagues. It's a specific analysis looking at hazardous commercial facilities and doing a flood analysis of those. So under our flood hazard analysis, you'll see there's a new item here labeled as such, with a link also to a metadata that provides a report that explains the whole methodology and how this was done. But this will take you out to an interactive map, which will provide data on a few different types of facilities, specifically Toxic Catastrophe Prevention Act sites, discharge prevention, containment, and countermeasure sites, community right to know sites, and known contaminated sites in New Jersey. For each of these, they've been pre-analyzed to both look at current flood risk, current flood risk that's in an overburdened community, current flood risks in general, and then future flood risk within an overburdened community. And so you can, each of these can be turned on and off, so you can look at them more precisely by just hitting the little eyeball buttons here on the right-hand side. And you can like zoom in to the different areas and click on the specific locations to get information about those sites, and also what they're impacted by. So you can see whether they'd be impacted by the different 100-year, 500-year flood zones, or specific levels of the coastal inundation due to sea level rise or flooding events. And so this is just kind of a nice way to kind of think about, different types of hazardous facilities that could be at risk due to flooding within your localities, and allows you to kind of explore that data set a little more easily.
And I just want to add that this is something that we've developed in response to issues that we've heard, particularly from community leaders and local officials in overburdened communities that, that make it clear to us that there are underlying inequities, including proximity of residents to sites and facilities that use hazardous materials that can be exacerbated by climate conditions. And so the reason that we did this analysis and created this data layer is for those communities that want to be considering those potential linkages as part of your local planning, whether as a community organization or as a a local official. So we hope that this is useful, and we really would love to get feedback on this. Thank you to everybody who is signing up to be testers. That's very exciting, including our friend Stacy Krause from Middletown, New Jersey.
So this data set is basically, it was just done within the last month. So we wanted to get it out for public use. So we like I said, we incorporated into NJADAPT. This will be being incorporated into some of our other tools. So we'll be pulling this data into Flood Mapper and other tools so that you can access it there as well, and combine other data sets with it to do whatever types of analyses you may want to consider. Like I said, we do have a link to the metadata. It provides a full report that you can read. It provides the data sources when they were pulled and basically what was done as part of the analysis. I think that's it for NJADAPT. Like I said, we've included the heat vulnerability index that was released this year. We have our social vulnerability data, which has been updated, I think, to the newest census data, as well as our flood. Like I said, the Mod 4 will be updated shortly as we process the new data we just got access to.
Okay. Marjorie, Lisa, are there any questions we need to address in the chat?
Okay. Yeah, we have a question which is about translation options, which is something we, what are the translation options for this site? And I think we know that we need to look at that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then someone is asking if there's an adequate explanation of storm surge on the site.
Depends on the type of storm surge. So yeah, we have different data sets specifically looking at that. So in terms of hurricane storm surge, we have the slosh model that comes, I believe, from FEMA. That's built into Flood Mapper, and you can view that data sets there. We also have a data set that looks at the Hurricane Sandy surge extent from the data that was collected from that event. The remaining data is specifically looking at uses what's called a bathtub model and looks at coastal flooding. So if we're looking at things such as 5 feet of sea level rise, we use the data set that comes from NOAA that basically looks at, from looking at the mean higher high water mark, 5 feet of additional flooding above that, and then basically pushes that inland to look at what areas would be flooded based on digital elevation models. So we have links out to all of those flood hazard data sets and where they come from, which includes the methodology of how they're created and what they cover. If there's anything specifically that the individual has questions about, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to try to explain. I know it can be complicated. There are a lot of different data sets looking at flooding and how they're analyzed and created.
And we also have a question. This one might be for James. Does the sea level rise data include land subsidence?
So the sea level rise data that we provide are just steps above current high water levels. So you can select a water level that would be appropriate for global sea level rise as well as increased sea level with land subsidence. So if you look at the DEP guidance for sea level rise by 2100, that includes global sea level rise and subsidence. So we're looking at the high end of that, that's 5 feet, including that. So you can view what 5 feet of just flooding and sea level rise would look like using the flood mapper tool, and that incorporates that in that way.
Thanks, James. Okay, Lucas,
Sure.
you want
So
to
the
bring it
final-
home?
The
Okay.
final update, this is a small and minor one, but it's something we wanted to include.
Nothing is small and
Nothing's
minor.
mine, I know.
Come on.
Considering all the other tools we just built, I have to put it in perspective. Our climate snapshots, we've made an update to these to include 5 feet of sea level rise as part of them. Previously, they included 2 and 7 feet, and then the FEMA flood zones. Given the DEP guidance of using 5 feet of sea level rise for the year 2100, we felt it was important to make sure that our snapshots reflected that information. And so now if you go into any of our reports, you may have seen this previously already, but we've included the 5 feet of total water level inundation to look at the impacts for those as well. So we include those for both the critical and built infrastructure. Someone previously asked about natural and working land, so I'll show that quickly. So we do provide, based on different types of land uses, looking at wetlands, open space, beaches and dunes, agricultural lands, and forest. We provide the acres exposed to 2 feet, 5 feet, and 7 feet in addition to the FEMA flood zones. We also have some data in this report just for those who are interested in looking at shoreline erosion, as well as marsh loss and retreat, and then looking at also as public access points. But so the 5 feet of sea level rise is incorporated everywhere throughout these reports, including the vulnerable population report I showed earlier. And so those can be accessed as well. So we just to be, like I said, be consistent with DEP planning policy. And that's it. That's all I have to cover. So I'm happy to take more questions about in general or about any of the specific tools or.
So, Lucas, I just want to make sure that we double down on one issue, which is if you could, well, 2 issues. If you could give the status of something that we know everybody is anxiously waiting for, which is a data layer that would correspond to DEP rulemaking on what we affectionately refer to as FEMA +3. That's my first question.
Sure.
Okay.
So we had released a preliminary data set of that a few months back. We have since revised the methodology that went into that to try and get something more accurate across the state. We have been working with our state agency partners to basically review that methodology and review the outputs of that analysis. We are currently, I believe I'm supposed to actually get today, as a matter of fact, an updated version of the analysis for us to review. And like I said, then we'll be reaching out with some of our partners to have them review it as well. So I know there's been people waiting its release. We are planning on releasing it as soon as possible. We want to make sure that we put out the best product possible, though. It is a complicated analysis to perform statewide.
So again, by joining this webinar, we'll have you on our email list. So when updates like that come, we'll let you know. And then Lucas, if you could just reiterate something that you touched on, which is the improvements that you and your team are focused on over the course of the coming months for this spring.
Sure. So one of the big things we are working on is our climate navigator approach. So this is a new approach to the tools that we have previously, where in the past we've created tools kind of to meet individual stakeholder needs around specific things such as Forest Adapt, which specifically looks at climate change impacts on forestry, Flood Mapper, HazAdapt, things of that nature. What we have kind of found through our feedback from our stakeholders and partners is that a lot of times there's needs to do analysis across different types of areas, and there may be needs that we haven't really anticipated or thought of yet. So we are working on building a new platform called NJ Climate Navigator, which will basically provide a more guided approach for users, allow them to help them find the specific either data sets, analysis, or tools they may be interested in using, and also allow for greater customization. So you can basically pull data sets from across the different types of areas of analysis that we may have provided in the past and be able to look at things such as, say, different types of forest data versus sea level rise data and vulnerable population data, and really allow you to kind of dig in and do the type of analysis you might need to do. Let me see if I don't have the demo page set up yet. We do have like just kind of an idea for this. Let me see if I can find it quickly, sorry.
Lucas, while you're looking for that,
Yep.
while we're taking most of the questions in the chat, I see that we have Honorable Dean Bob Goodman, who has raised his hand. Bob, I'm gonna unmute you, so if you wanna offer your thought.
Well, as an example of what I'm going to talk about is the my question about the EV vehicle charging stations as not being, and the bigger question that I want to raise is that underlying all of this beautiful work are existing data sets. And it seems to me that a really important use of these tools, at least managing these tools, is identifying areas where new data sets or better data sets are needed.
Yeah.
And so that the tools and the users of the tools are driving to some extent the work that goes into getting new data sets. For example, hyper local temperature data, heat island data in cities like Newark. When you look at that particular situation, the reporting stations are very few for very intensively, what's the term, granular situations where people on different sides of the same street could be under different kinds of or levels of intensity of impact. So it's just a point that driving the development of new data sets is an important use of these tools, secondary use of these tools in my mind. And I just wanted to call attention to that.
Hi, Bob, it's Marjorie. Hi, Bob,
Yeah.
it's Marjorie. Thank you so much for that comment. I just thought maybe I'd put James on the spot just to let you know about a little project he has, which is actually trying to answer some of that kind of a question. It would be just useful for you to know as our dean, so former dean.
Yes, so out of the Department of Environmental Sciences, we are launching, hopefully this spring, a project in Camden to actually measure some of those kind of ground level effects of urban heat. So you brought it up, and it's completely true. Granular data, especially in urban areas for temperature and the like, is very hard to come by. It's hard to get sensors out there. People play with the sensors, mess with them. And so it makes the research actually much harder on that. So we're hoping to play with some ways of actually getting that kind of information. So, it'd initially be for Camden, but we would use lessons learned there that we can report on here as needed. But yes, driving new data sets, especially that kind of hyper local effects, are really important, especially in our urban communities.
Yeah.
And as you work on the Camden one, I'm working with a group at Newark that has the same kind of interest in Newark City. So we should be talking about this as a project that I'm involved in with the Price Institute in Newark.
Well, and in fact, Bob, we're just beginning a very technical scientist to scientist conversation with a variety of folks at the State Department of Environmental Protection who are launching work in some North Jersey urban communities so that the scientists can compare methodology and, and also things like what kind of sensors you're using. So we can loop back to you and play into that sort of technical conversation. Marjorie's going to be facilitating that. It's way over my head. Thank you, Bob, for joining us. We're honored that you joined us.
Terrific. Oh, honored.
Thank you.
I'm honored that you're doing this wonderful work. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Marjorie and Lisa and Pripal, do we have
there are a couple of questions we probably could answer fast, I think. How much time do we have? So of course, is my coast data incorporated into this analysis and feeding into it at some point?
So it's not being concluded in any of the analyses. It is a data set that's included in our NJ flood mapper. We pull directly from the New Jersey My Coast platform, and you can see those locations on the map and click on them to get information about the different flooding events that have been submitted. But that is something that we can work with Lisa Armuller and stuff to figure out if there's ways we can basically provide some analysis of those data sets as well, if that would be useful to users. Yes.
Great. And we have a couple of questions still on Mod 4.
Sure.
Hi, Sarah LaPuma. Sarah's wanting to know when the next updated version of Mod 4 data is going to be available, if we know that. And somebody's asking if we know how to link to the Mod 4 from this website.
Yes. So the Mod 4 data, it comes out at typically around the end of each calendar year. So the 2023 data was just released last month. We just recently got access to it. And so we are in the middle of processing it for the flood hazard analysis. It does take time because there are over 3 million records for the entire state that we have to process. So I would anticipate that would probably be updated within the next month or so, just given, depending on schedules and when we can fit this into our work plan. But we'll be releasing, we can send out an announcement through our listservs of when that data has been updated.
Yeah.
In terms of linking it, yes, all the data that's on NJADAPT, it includes what's called the PAMS pin. It's also called the GIS pin. It's a unique identifier that can be easily linked to the GIS parcel data sets that are available from the New Jersey Office of GIS. So you can link those up easily and to map that data if you wish. I will give it the caveat that those data sets do not 100% match usually ever, just because of the different methodologies that are used in collecting those data sets. So there is usually a slight disconnect. You'll get good matching, but there'll be some issues where certain ones may not match due to data being out of sync with each other.
Thanks, Lucas. And I want to answer a question about whether the kinds of data that we're showing today will be used to update the state hazard mitigation plan. And the answer is a resounding yes. And in fact, the NJADAPT and some of the other work here shown today, the support for this work has come from the state Office of Emergency Management, which specifically has supported this work for a couple reasons, two of which is to allow us to pull together these data to help inform the update to the state plan, but also then to have these kind of easy to use or easy enough to use tools for counties and municipalities to use to be able to align with the state hazard mitigation plan by using the tools. So yes, definitely. Thank you. Thanks, Lorette.
Okay, so there's another question that I think you can answer pretty quickly. Are there any overlays with green infrastructure and our tree canopy data?
We do have tree canopy data in our NJ Forest Adapt tool. That's the data set that's actually used to do the analysis that we look at with impervious cover. Sorry, what was the other one, Marjorie, in terms of the green infrastructure?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I don't know if we have anything specific in our flooding analysis tools. It's been a while since I've looked closely at Forest Adapt. We may have some data sets in there related to green infrastructure, but other than like open space and preserved areas, I can't speak specifically to that.
But on that note, and related to another question I saw in the chat, we are spending a little bit of time really looking at the conservation blueprint. We have a lot of friends at Rowan University, and looking to see how we might be able to align some of the resources that are there, within the NJADAPT platform. So thanks.
I have two other categories of questions. One was around water quality data and or stormwater management data layers. And then second, separately, just a note that we did get a ton of people interested in being testers, but not really fully understanding that process. So it's a note that we will get back to people about that. And there isn't a password or a place for you to sign up right now,
Right.
Yeah.
but we will note your interest and we will use it in the future.
Yes. In terms of the water quality data, we don't have any of that included currently in any of our NJADAPT platforms. We are doing work separate from our NJADAPT work around the areas of water quality, specifically in New Jersey. And so there will be opportunities for that data to be linked into some of these platforms in the future. So I would say it's definitely something that could be coming down the pike in the future.
So another one, I don't know, Lucas, if we can answer it. Someone specifically, Howard Zill is asking is how does it relate to First Street's risk factor for flood? And also wildlife data. I just wasn't sure wasn't aware that First Street did wildlife data, but anyway.
I can't speak specifically to First Street. They have their own methodology and modeling, and my understanding is behind a paywall. So unfortunately, I can't speak directly to that.
Yes, thank you. Trying to see if there's anything. I think we're good with things we can answer. Sherry Pressy asked, will the flood map update also include riparian zones?
Yes. So one of the things we'll be incorporating soon in the future is NOAA does have has a wetland retreat data set that they've generated as regarding sea level rise to show basically areas that will be transitioning from either freshwater marshes to saltwater and from dry areas to new wetlands. We plan on incorporating that data into the tools since it is readily accessible right now. And I believe it's available from 1 to 10 feet of sea level rise. So you can see those impacts and changes depending on different types of flood scenarios.
And I don't
Think
see.
we're good, Marjorie?
Yeah, I do think we are.
So I just want to quickly show what Gina was talking about. So this is kind of just a mock-up of potentially what our new Climate Navigator platform will kind of look like, at least an initial like a landing page. And really what we're focusing on here is trying to provide information in different types of contexts, depending on what you user might be interested in. So, if you're coming in looking for information about specific hazards, let's say, you could be able to click on these that'll guide you through different questions to help you get to the specific data sets or tools you might be interested in. Conversely, I'm interested in information about a specific place and being able to select a location and then seeing what kind of data and tools may be available for you for your location. Maybe you're looking for guidance with specific processes. So doing a coastal resilience plan, a hazard mitigation plan, land use plan, plan endorsement, things of that nature, similar to our local planning guide. These can be located in here and will help you provide guidance for accessing the data and tools you would need for those specific processes. Again, another one would be looking at specific sectors. So looking at specific areas of New Jersey that may be impacted by climate change, such as agriculture, coastal resilience, environmental justice, built infrastructure, natural resources, public health, things of that nature. We'll still have links to our kind of classic tools. So being able to go directly and kind of be able to view your classic flood mapper interface or forest adapt interface or municipal snapshots. And then even potentially having data broken out by specific types of users. So tools and things that may be specifically useful to city planners versus emergency managers or versus public health professionals. So we're really trying to provide a more guided approach going forward with the new platform we're developing. They'll still allow you to access all of the data sets and tools that we've developed over time and will continue to develop, but provide them in a more easily usable and kind of modifiable capacity.
And thank you. Jean, there's one, Lorette, of course, who we've known for a long time, had a great question, which was, when a community uses this tool to identify its vulnerabilities, are there links to mitigation strategies and solutions it can use to address them? So that is a very interesting thought.
That is a very interesting thought, Lorette. Thank you for pushing the envelope here. And also in terms of pushing the envelope, thanks to Nick Tafaro, who's pointing us to federal RFPs that he's suggesting we apply for. Thank you, everyone. So the answer is no, Lorette, and but it's a great idea. However, there are other tools that we don't have time to talk about today that various partners are involved in, such as one called the Restoration Explorer, and others. And it perhaps, and I'm brainstorming now, and Lucas is probably like kicking me under the table, even though we're in 2 different counties. Perhaps at minimum, we could start to link to some tools such as that in order to be able to, make those connections between tools that are assisting end users with understanding mitigation strategies with our tools that really sort of focus on understanding hazards and impacts. So thanks for that thought. I think the other way I would answer your question is that we also know that working with a community, whether that's local officials or community leaders, and understanding what are the mitigation strategies that are going to work in that place is not just kind of like a data here, come look at our data tool exercise, but something that really requires human interaction and engagement and conversation. And so to that extent, we are definitely looking to expand our outreach and technical assistance program. So that's why we're signing you all up on our website, so we can inform you about that work as well. So thank you. Thanks, Laurette. Okay. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much to the Rutgers team, particularly Lucas Marxen, Michelle Stewart, Jonathan Delore, Pripal Bamra, who have invested tons and tons of time in the nuts and bolts of developing these tools. Certainly to my co-director, Marjorie Kaplan, Lisa Aramola, James Shope, Rick Lathrop, who directs the Center for Remote Sensing and Spatial Analysis, who could not be with us today, and his team. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to everyone who joined us, because what we hear from you is what drives our agenda. And so now you know where to find us. We know to find you. We'll continue to communicate, and we're very grateful for your involvement and for hanging in there for a very dense but exciting Lucas webinar. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Stay well.